I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Rachel, and this is Neurodivergent Voices, the podcast amplifying the voices and lived experience of the neurodivergent community.
We're licensed occupational therapists who specialize in the brain and are neurodivergent ourselves. Join us every so often in this podcast that is for you and by you, the neurodivergent community.
If you're interested in learning more about neurodiversity and joining a vibrant community of neuro-inclusive adults, head to our website, divergecommunity.com.
Interested in an interview? Email divergecs@gmail.com to get it scheduled. Let's get to it.
So do you want to kind of give a brief description of your name, where you're from, kind of give a little bio about yourself?
Sure. Hello, my name is Elana, and I am in Portland, Oregon. I have lived in a lot of places over the years, and this is where I'm living right now. I also spent the last 4 years in New Zealand. I just got back a few months back. So that was a big stint of abroad being. And what were the other parts? Oh, the bio. Yeah. I'm an OT by trade. I have worked with kids with disabilities and no disabilities since I was like 15. So that's like 20 years now. And it's always been really clear to me that that is my line of work. Like since that first summer camp, it was like straight shot. This is for me. And in recent years, I've thought career-wise, I've been thinking more about how to like make sure that I can still do it and it's sustainable and doesn't lead to burnout, because I've had a few burnout type episodes when it comes to like the way it is to practice OT, especially in the US. So I still care a lot about it, but I'm thinking carefully and thoughtfully about how I want to be an OT.
Yeah, I'm really excited to hear about your experience in New Zealand and how it kind of contrasts, because in our mind, we kind of put New Zealand and Australia and UK and like this pedestal of like, hey, this is goals for what OT could be like. And I don't know, maybe those are well-founded and maybe not. So I'm excited to see your perspective living and breathing in both. But before we dive too much in, I do want to give a chance for people who are just listening to be able to kind of visualize what's going on here. Would you be able to provide a quick visual description of yourself?
Sure. I'm a white female with dark eyes and dark hair that is currently in small braids that are unraveling, and it's a bit frizzy at the top. And I have a really dark purple maroon kind of colored shirt on. And I'm just sitting here in my bed against the wall.
Beautiful.
Do you want to give for me?
Yeah.
Right now, Stephanie here, I am wearing my wool green sweater that Rachel hates.
Oh, it's beautiful. I just can't touch it.
My hair is getting kind of an extra red tint lately because I can't dye it just yet. I'm also a white female. Also wearing some extra baggy pants currently just to make it comfy. And me and Rachel are both in my kitchen currently.
Yes. And just wanted to show real quick who's up there too. We have her chickens who always make an appearance in our little videos there. Don't know how that got started, but here we are.
This one.
Yep. So Rachel, I'm sitting here. I'm in a black, what would you call this material?
Velvety.
Kind of a velvety, but not a bad velvet, just like a soft cropped sweater. And then I'm wearing these I just want to show you this real quick because they were a great find recently. Fun little color block jeans. One is dark blue and one is light blue.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know, just a little bit different,
Nice.
exciting, little dopamine dressing. And
Nice.
wearing fun sterling silver, kind of like weird, maybe they look almost like a pizza slice. But just some interesting earrings, and then my hair is up in a clip as usual. And I am sitting to Stephanie's left. And here we are. Wonderful.
Do we want
Here we
to
are.
talk about the questions first, or do we want to go right into a side topic about New Zealand?
Let's do questions first. I
Okay.
wrote it down so I don't forget to ask you about the differences between America and New Zealand.
Okay.
Or else we won't ever get to any of the questions.
I know, that's true. Very true.
So, can you share a little bit about what you do in your free time? What your favorite occupations are, if you will?
Sure. Yes, I have always been a person who values their occupations. Um, and I think that being an OT helps me like view them as meaningful occupations and keep in the forefront, like, making sure I get a bit of each. So, social time, like with connecting with friends, preferably one-on-one, maybe a smaller group, but generally not big, loud groups or like late night parties. Preferably outdoors, like taking a walk. Sometimes we'll cook together. Sometimes we'll like do a craft together. So there's like that is kind of my social thing. And sometimes that's met also by like a phone call or a video chat with somebody who's far away.
Sure.
And time outside is important to me. Time spent in nature and like maybe hanging on trees or kind of like being near them or being in a garden doing garden stuff. And moving my body in nature is even better, but also I like to move my body indoors, like climbing gym or weightlifting gym or just some contact improv or whatever is available. Yeah, so moving my body, social engagement, like home tending, I like to sweep sometimes.
Yeah.
Sweeping, keeping things tidy, keeping up with the laundry. I know I'm like going through the domains, but this is really how I see my life.
You're giving us a great
And I like to do like self-sufficient autonomy kind of things like cooking and baking. And I like to not use recipes and just sort of like throw things in and unknown how they'll turn out, but always eat them in the end. Took a few notes. Let's see if I missed anything. Oh yes, my alone time is important. But it's also important to not like have too much of that at once or like in a long stretch. And that is often spent on screens or reading or spoon carving. I've been getting into last few months, or the cooking.
Okay. I've never heard of spoon carving.
Oh yeah.
Spoon carving?
No.
I feel like it had some deep roots in OT, Stephanie. Like that was an early occupation. But anyway, tell
like
us
carving
about carving
out of wood, like making a spoon with like, tools out of wood.
And are you familiar with the spoon theory?
Yeah.
Okay, so I just love kind of the metaphorical nature of that too. Like you are getting your spoons back through literally carving spoons. I think
Ooh.
cool.
Huh. I never made that connection, but I like it.
Anyway,
Thank you.
Very cool.
I know you briefly mentioned kind of being in this kind of realm or starting this kind of realm when you were 15 and whatnot. But did you know like about OT when you were 15, or how did you get into it? And what would you like consider your OT elevator speech as?
My OT elevator speech about what is OT or how did I get into it? Or both?
So both. Let's start with how you got into occupational.
Okay. My older sister was a camp counselor at the like a local camp that had a kind of a special needs kids camp along with it, and she had a good experience, and so I just sort of, being a fairly undifferentiated person, thought I'll do what she did, and I went for it. And I was 15 at the time, and I had like a group of kids that were like 10 to 13. So very close in age to me. And most of them were autistic. At the time, we were advised to say people with autism because that's how the times were. And I remember on the very first day that one of the kids who I felt very endeared to, and he was just sort of constantly counting under his breath and muttering numbers. And I would say, "What are you counting?" And he would say, "Miles in gasoline, like gas miles per gallon." Like he was really about gas stations and gas tanks. That was an interest of his. And then I remember that we had to sort of line up at the end of the day, and I was sort of like in a line modeling that for the other kids. And he stood right in front of me, looked down and looked at me with a worried look and said, "Hey, my hips are wider than yours." And I was just like floored by that comment, and I was delighted by the honesty of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll never forget it. And then I kind of went into a like, I need to go to the library and read all the psychology textbooks and read everything about autism and read like Lovas's like behaviorist model, because again, that was how it was in the, what was it, 20 years ago. And read my older sister's abnormal psych textbook. And so that's kind of how I got into that. And then, all the part-time jobs I had throughout the rest of high school, summers, college, afterwards, were all like, within the realm of working with autistic people. And I guess we can get into that also. But, at the time I was somebody who, given my level of like, I had some experience, but I was nobody's like therapist at the time. So I did have a number of kids that I kind of carried out their in-home ABA programs with, with the cards and the, all like the, what's this and name that and do the puzzle and the discrete trial thing. And so I just like, when it comes to neurodiversity affirming stuff, I feel like back then I was doing it and felt gross about it. And I'm so excited that it is now a wider communal gross feeling about, well, more than just gross. That's not the best word, but I feel like I've really seen the shift and I've been so relieved about it.
I really respect and applaud your honesty with that and your humility to say like, hey, there was this thing that I did and that was the best at the time and I was excited about it, and now I'm excited that we're doing better. And I think a lot of people, instead of acknowledging where they're coming from, they just kind of want to bury the past. So that's real. That's so real.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you sharing that. So
thanks. I was listening to another one of your guys' podcasts, I think it was, and was it with Bryden, I think, that you were talking about burying the past in AOTA or something?
Yes.
I was just listening to that still because I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I think that's very real. I mean, at the time, like, I wanted to, continue my work with autistic kids, and that was the only way it was done. And so that's what I did. Although I was also reading Greenspan's Engaging Autism and like feeling better about the situations that were more like play-based and at the time. But I also remember when I just decided unilaterally to remove those jobs from my resume, just because I was like, if somebody that I'm looking to get a job with sees that and is happy about it, I don't want to get that job. So, yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious. I was like, there was a question I was going to ask. I'm like, let's not go there yet. So I'm gonna reel that back in just for a second, not for you, but just for our listeners, perhaps. No, maybe we'll get there. So you started in kind of this realm of working with autistic children or autistic young teens. What different settings have you been in, and have you kind of stuck with autistic folks as your focus?
It was a mixture of autistic and a variety of other kind of developmental delays or differences, or some people without diagnoses at all. And I'm fortunate that even from the very beginning, I had like supervisors who were always saying the diagnoses don't matter. We're not even going to tell you the diagnoses. And as a teen, I was like, can you please? Because I want to equip myself and be prepared. But now I understand that they were trying to make a point that it's the person in front of you. And I mean, there's pluses and minuses, and I see your face when I say that. And I've worked camps, after school programs, babysitting, kind of like accompanying kids over the years to their OT or speech therapy sessions, some like sports coach. I guess that was all before I became an OT. Like, so, school and yeah, it was more of the kind of mental and cognitive side, but a little bit of with kids with cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, and some more of the physical side of disabilities. I've always been more interested in kids, and I did do a year of part-time home health right out of OT school, which was sweet in its own way too. But yeah, then I worked mostly in an outpatient pediatric sensory clinic here in Portland. For 4 years before I went to New Zealand, and then I worked in like the national health system. So I worked in two different departments there. First was an Indigenous child and adolescent mental health service, and the next one was I was practicing as what there is called a visiting neurodevelopmental therapist, which is only a term in New Zealand, and it's a thing that PTs or OTs can be, and it's kind of like akin to early intervention here. It's like part NICU follow-up, so like lots of developmental monitoring from like, birth to 3, and then part just various delays in any area of development that kind of come through in that age range. But that was, that was a great learning experience for me because I had some wonderful, like a really wonderful mentor who'd been working as a VNT for a while, but also because of the gamut of conditions and situations, like it was plenty of kids that were on the massive waiting list to be assessed for autism, 2 and 3-year-olds. And then I got to be a part of those assessments, which was really eye-opening and really good experience for me. And then, to the child that has developmental trauma because they're kind of in lots of different placements and have experienced maybe abuse or neglect. So of course their development is different, or something like an isolated gross motor delay, or, a genetic condition or something at birth, heart surgery at birth or something. So it was really or like failure to thrive, a really wide variety from the physical motor stuff to the cognitive social play stuff. Communication. So that was a lovely work experience for me. And now I'm trying to do my own practice.
Yay.
Yeah.
Tell us more about your practice.
Yeah. So it's a new thing for me, and it's called Bloom OT and Consulting. And that's because my middle name is Bluma. That's not a thing that most people know. They probably just see it and think it's called Bloom. Yeah. That's nice for like the flower, which is also a reason, but yeah, it has that meaning for me. And in that I am seeing 0 to 3 in home. So that kind of early intervention age. And also just been collaborating with some local speech therapists and also like parent-child playgroup leaders to do some workshops on like sensory processing, interoception, neurodivergent play, some parent education, and then some like hopefully soon also some like preschool teacher education and just wider consulting to the people that like are day in day out with the people with disabilities, as opposed to the one-to-one send them to me kind of thing.
What kind of motivated you or inspired you to kind of go out on your own and take more of this consultative private practice realm?
That's really my experience with my last job in New Zealand, and seeing how useful it can be when I am just slightly less hands-on. Because of the large caseloads that we had, we were seeing kids once a month or even once every 3 months. Yeah. A very rare circumstance would be every other week, but that was just 1 or 2 kids. And I found that, especially at those younger ages, that really helped support the parents to feel like, oh, this is actually on me and I can do this. And, Elana leaves me with this plan, and I know I'll see her again in a month. And in that time, we're going to do all these things, as opposed to like, cool, see you next week. Oops, I didn't get a chance this week, but you'll see her soon anyway, kind of thing. And in that role, I also got to do some education for like other staff members within the hospital system and of other disciplines, just around neurodivergence and sensory processing and some other things. And that kind of, I felt more excited about that, and I felt like I was making more impact And ultimately, I want to be empowering the people with the children,
Yeah.
like, as opposed to them feeling like I, as the professional, am the only one that can help out here.
Mm-hmm.
So I really feel passionately about ungatekeeping some of our knowledge or some of my knowledge.
Yeah. I love that term ungatekeeping because I feel like a lot of times us as professionals, like in grad school, depending on your professors and how they teach, but they tell you to kind of like hold your value almost.
Mm-hmm.
But just how you were explaining with New Zealand, how we're not the people there every day with the kids or with the individual themselves. So it's best to educate people that are with them and kind of give them tips and tricks on what's going to best serve the kids versus kind of us holding knowledge behind these hypothetical closed doors and stuff. Because even currently, I still work at a pediatric outpatient clinic too on the side of our private practice. And just like how you were saying, you have the parents that come in, they're like, oh, I didn't get to it and I didn't get to that. And it's hard to kind of say, hey, I only see your kid 45 minutes out of the entire week. You're with them the entire rest of the week. And I'm more here to help you like engage with your kid in a more holistic way so that and just teach them different ways to kind of actually interact with their own kid. So I love that kind of you're taking a big part and being this role of educating more on a community basis.
Empowerment too, right? I like to say, when it's kind of part of my elevator speech, but when I'm introducing my role to folks, I often say, if I'm doing a good job, you're not going to need me. Like my role is to help empower you with knowledge and with skills and tools to think like an OT and to just be more satisfied and effective within your life. So I think it's interesting to compare and contrast kind of your model and what you explored in New Zealand of this very infrequent but powerful contact that you're having with folks, and comparing that to what is more of the commonplace in the US, where sometimes these kids are, removed from more or less from their natural environment and are receiving support 40 hours a week from a professional. And to think about what that might do to the parents' sense of efficacy and, ability to really be effective with their child if they have to be removed from that environment and be supported elsewhere. So I think twofold, the fact that you come into the home and the fact that you come less often, I think are both serve well to empower and support instead of doing for, I guess. It's cool.
Yeah, thanks for that. I really like what you said about you won't need me kind of thing. Because, I have practiced in that way and I know what it's like. And I also know that it's motivated by bottom line, like insurance companies, and the clinic needs to earn money, and people kind of get into a sort of complacent inertia with it. But, I came into my first job in New Zealand kind of with still my same mindset of outpatient pediatric sensory clinic with all of the games and all of the toys, all of the swings, slides, climbing, all the things, and feeling like I've done this for years, I can do this. And then when I got there, and it was a more mental health space, but we just had like 2 rooms with chairs and like a table. And I could maybe find some markers and that was it. Like that was it, And I was like, oh, how can I be a good OT without any of the equipment? And my perspective shifted, and I'm really glad for that. And then in my other role there, COVID was at a high, and my mentor was saying, I don't go into anyone's house with anything ever, just because of the germs. And ultimately, I didn't really do that either, unless it was something that I was prepared to leave with them, so they could use it. And it worked out fine. And I do feel like with the hold my value versus like sharing the knowledge to think like an OT, I really do want to hold my value, and that's part of my work as a female, and like, practicing holding the line, holding my value, and advocating for, my knowledge, and like not to do volunteer work, for example, in this capitalist society. But also, I think that there's ways to do both, and you just have to kind of choose the families and be careful with. Like, some people do actually warrant more therapy and longer terms of it, and that's fine, but just not doing that across the board. So I guess, just doing what people need, the just right amount, so that I'm helping and I'm giving of myself, and I'm not taking over all of the control and disempowering families. But I'm also not just saying, here's your list of tips and tricks, good luck.
Yeah, right.
True.
Yeah. Absolutely. So going back to kind of that second part of the question Stephanie had asked originally, do you have like a quick elevator pitch or way that you describe occupational therapy or the type of occupational therapy you provide?
Yeah. And I monitor it in real time based on the person's face who's listening to me or has asked. So I generally say it's a broad rehabilitation profession that helps people oftentimes with or after illness, injury, or disability with daily life tasks and activities, things that they have to do or things that they feel like doing.
Beautiful. Beautiful. That was one of our hardest assignments in grad school, was to be concise and to be able to communicate that in a way that made sense regardless of your previous experience or your audience, right? And I think you did a nice job with that.
Thanks. It's taken some years of crafting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's fun as you get more specialized or more niche, you can be a little bit more specific in your answer too, right? Because it's like, we can do all these things, but I've kind of chosen to do this, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. How do you run Neurodivergent Voices podcast, right? So, and we've met over like various Facebook groups and stuff. Yeah. So how kind of do you identify yourself as neurodivergent, or are you just like really passionate about the neurodivergent population? Kind of, can you give us a little bit more context behind it?
Sure. I had actually forgotten that because I was getting so into this other stuff.
I know.
Yeah, I am neurodivergent. I came to that realization like 1 year and 1 week ago.
Well, happy anniversary.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, and by came to that realization, I mean truly considered that I could be for the first time. For the 19 years before that, I had just been telling myself, of course not me, I'm much too social. And yeah, it was on a climbing trip, actually, in a beautiful scenic place called Kawakawa Bay, overlooking Lake Taupo, this really beautiful big lake. And I was about to start a lead climb with some of my close friends. And I was like, had my hands on the rock. And then I looked towards them and said, hey, do you think I could be neurodivergent? And they were like, go climb. We'll talk about it later. And I was like, no, but you know how I don't eat white and creamy foods, and I don't like, music, and I don't like this, and I do like that, and how I say this, and I do that. And they were like, okay, well, yeah, of course. Now go climb. And I was like, that was a really meaningful moment because I felt both seen and also really vulnerable and also like really affirmed, like, oh, right, actually they knew that and it was still me and we're just still here climbing and nothing's changed.
Wow. I like how your friends in that moment, too, like you said, they saw you in the moment and they kind of already knew per se, and they're just like, okay, yeah, that's you. That's you. Go ahead. That's you. We're here to climb.
Yeah.
No,
wow. What do you think it was about that moment?
That's a good question. I think I was thinking about the particular sort of social norm of cheering people on and giving high fives and saying sort of colloquial supportive things to friends or peers when you're doing an activity together, because there was a few of us there at the crag, and I've learned and feel quite well practiced and equipped with my cheering and high-fiving, as I've always played sports. But I do remember that that took a while, and I had that shivery, uncomfortable feeling for many years. Like, should I shout now? Should I say woo, like in a high-pitched voice, or should I say like, yeah, person's name, or should I stretch my hand out for a high five? But what if they don't see it? I have to sort of do it low and, but not too low. So I was thinking all of those things for a lot of years. And then I guess we were maybe supporting each other there. And I saw that my friend Jessie was just so easily like being supportive, and it felt so good. And she seemed to just very naturally like say all of the right things at the right time. And after that climb, I asked her, like, did you have to learn that? Like, or did that just sort of like come naturally to you? Or did you like think about how to cheer people on as one of the many things? And she said, no, it really came naturally. And, when I said it didn't come naturally to me, like it took a lot of work, she was like, yeah, I can see that. And again, a non-issue.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Wow. That's a really good friend group that you found.
It sure sounds like it.
Yeah.
Now, were these friends you met and made in New Zealand, or are they friends?
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, they're there right now. Yeah.
Do you still keep in contact with them?
Yes, I do.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm with the right kind of people to be spending time with. Mm-hmm.
Totally.
Wow. So, in the past year, in a week, in one day, what have been, I'm sorry, this is a curveball. Are you okay with curveballs?
Yes, totally.
Okay, because I'm like, I know I like to be prepared in my thoughts and whatever. What have been some shifts since you've had that realization? What have been some things that have been different in your life?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've practiced saying it out loud to some people, but only the closest friends, really. And then a few people just as a little practice, like if I meet somebody like in a social gathering or something, and then I'll maybe say it or let it come up in some way and see how they respond, just to sort of try it on.
Mm-hmm.
And that's felt pretty okay. And I've gotten affirmation from people. Oh yes, the other thing I did was I made a Facebook post about it, which isn't something I do very often. I just said, hey, Facebook friends who have known me over the last long time, like, here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking I may be neurodivergent because of the various examples here. I didn't go too deep or personal, but just a few things. Hey, what do you guys think? And I got all these responses. And the overwhelming sentiment was yes.
Mm-hmm.
Like, actually, everyone said yes. And they were also a lot of people who shared, and I am too, and this is my process, and I only recently got diagnosed, or it takes one to know one, or I always thought you were one of us, things like that. And after that, reading those Facebook comments, like, from people who have known me over various circumstances, I was kind of like, yeah, I guess that confirms it. So it's been a lot of internal shifting, because of course I have a lot of the internalized ableism and, the things that were drilled into me as a child and a teen, like, you must conform. Is everybody else doing that? If not, then why are you doing it? You're too sensitive. All of the things. So I was always, you're always showing everything you're feeling on your face. You have to learn to stop that. It's not safe. Just be more like everybody else. And lots of harmful messaging. Yeah. So when it comes to like some of my preferences and needs for movement and like body experiences, I've been doing my best to really think of them not as like, okay, well, I just need to do this quick thing and then I'll be able to get back to the ideal state, but rather like, I need this thing and this is a non-negotiable for me now. So I'm not going to feel like, oh, I'm being a little bit weird, but that's okay if I like take my shirt off after a day of work, lie on the rug and just like roll around and scratch my back on the rug and feel it like, a deep scratch from the rug on my back and my shoulders and my arms. I'm just going to be like, yeah, I'm doing this because like this is a thing I need and this is a thing
Yeah.
I'm going to do and it feels good and is regulating and that's the end of the sentence.
Mm.
And there's no evaluative nature or judgment around it. And same with like I think work situations a lot, being more comfortable trying to advocate like, hey, I prefer no music on, or do you mind if we turn the lights off? Or okay, at about the 40-minute mark, that's me for sitting in a chair. So
Yeah.
I'm still down to continue the conversation, but I'll be doing maybe some planks or some like yoga stretches just here.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think, since becoming kind of more self-aware of yourself in the past year and 1 week and 1 day, um,
376 days.
yeah, do you think it's become easier to kind of give yourself the accommodations that are coming about in your daily life, like you going on the floor with the carpet and stuff? Like, is it coming a little bit easier to recognize versus kind of that self ableism that kind of goes on? Because just experience as like a neurodivergent person myself, knowing I wasn't diagnosed late, we knew very early on that I was different with my family and stuff. They're like, oh, clearly dyslexic, ADHD, all the this, that, and the other. And was kind of told not necessarily the most ableist things, but still like you got to suppress a lot of these things, and kind of coming into more grad school and even after grad school times, coming to realizations that like, hey, no, I do have accommodations that I can give myself, and that's okay. I don't need to kind of suppress anything. Like I can say to myself, I'm going to listen to audiobooks, and that's actually reading still, that I really do enjoy those things. So I don't know if there's other things besides kind of the carpet stuff, or how easily it comes to you now to kind of give yourself those accommodations.
Mm. Well, before I recognized my own neurodivergence, as an OT, I recognized like the things that I had needed to be doing with my body my whole life as my sensory processing needs.
Yeah.
Sort of like being upside down. I was into gymnastics, really into it as a younger kid. And I was always doing headstands and handstands. And still now, I make sure to be upside down like multiple times daily. Like, stretching my back in a certain way. I got into weightlifting about 6 years ago. So I see that as like, my need for proprioceptive input, and getting my heart rate high enough so that I can feel it is pretty grounding. Yeah, playing a lot of ultimate frisbee. Oh, I can't believe I didn't mention that. It's an important occupation of mine. Yeah, cardio and social needs. And yeah, so I think I've always known them, and I've always strived to meet the needs that I have, but it's more of the framing around it, or the sort of like self-critical lens that has seen it more in the past as like, oh well, it's too bad that I need this, but I guess I just will do it. Now as like, this is me, and like, I have to. I mean, of course, I've been working on my like self-compassion and self-allyship just overall in life, and so that's part and parcel of this. And also thinking about the people I spend time with, because I have a lot of food particularities, like lots of things that I don't eat and I don't want to eat. And there have been lots of periods in my life, when I've been encouraged to eat more and eat different things, drink milk like as a kid. And then, in my 20s, I was, I had good friends that would often joke around with me, or they thought it was joking. For me, it felt like pretty invalidating and almost dehumanizing, like, oh, you're such a picky eater, oh yeah, you never eat anything, and I was kind of like, I'm not a picky eater, I just, doesn't everyone have foods they like and don't like? And turns out lots of adults just eat about everything. And I still have, I mean, I've eaten a lot more over my adulthood than when I was a child, but I still have I still have my no list, and I stand by it. And so now when I can, living in a pretty like progressive space like Portland, people are very into, respecting each other's dietary and food preferences. And I find that it feels so affirming and good to be around somebody who is interested in knowing the foods that I don't eat so that they can keep that in mind when we share food together, as opposed to making a comment like, wow, you don't eat that? Oh my God, you're missing out. Or you have to try this. Or wow, you're such a picky eater. You know, those comments.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many different things that you mentioned that I'm like, but my gears just, I always do this. My gears just started spinning and then I just want to dive into all of them. But of course my working memory doesn't work well enough to remember all of them. But I want to touch more on, I'm saying these out loud so I don't forget. I want to touch more on the food thing. And I also want to talk about your environment because I just had this total aha moment in my head, not to make this about me, but I'm just now realizing. So Portland's tagline, or at least it was when I went in 2010 or whatever, is keep Portland weird, right? There's just like this environment and this just like communal embracingness of what is like so clearly neurodivergence, which I never even thought of. But I went there as a senior in high school, and I just remember feeling like I like came home or something. Like it was just the space in which like everyone could just be who they were in a way that I had never experienced before. And it really opened my eyes to like, oh, I'm not just like quirky and weird and whatever. I'm just me. And that's fine. Like so really powerful experience I had in Portland. And I think it your environment and the way in which others treat one another and treat themselves really has so much to do with like how accepted and progressive we can be with just difference in general, but especially with neurodivergence, which kind of like wants me to pull back to the this whole topic of New Zealand too, and the contrastingness, the comparing and contrasting, because I think the environment really does make such a big difference in our ability to unmask and embrace our true selves, and see and appreciate and accommodate neurodivergence.
Yeah.
So I know that we've already hit 43 minutes and you're, probably need to get some rope and vestibular input and squirming and stuff too. So if at any point you're like, want to do some planks, handstands, do what you got to do. Okay. We're 100% support it. And if you got to go, that's good too.
Thanks. So, I'm good. I mean, it's just a snow day here. So yeah.
Oh, same. Almost be across the bay. So what were some of the major differences you saw in New Zealand around neurodiversity?
Yeah, I'm glad that you're honing it into that, because I was like, oh no, the healthcare system at large is such a big conversation.
Yeah.
But neurodiversity specifically, so I was so stoked at how the powers that be there, like the national health system, the literature they put out, the courses they recommend, their, like our guide to autism kind of thing, the diagnostic process, the people who do the diagnoses, at least within the service I worked at, which was in Wellington, part of Wellington Hospital, the Children's Hospital, was so neurodiversity affirming and way more than I have experienced from kind of those types of levels here. So not the individual therapists I've worked with, but more like diagnosing professionals or medical doctors or literature put out or official recommendations from, for example, insurance companies. So ABA it exists in New Zealand, but it's very minor and it's the exception as opposed to here. I don't think there even are any ABA providers in Wellington. They're not that I encountered, and that's the capital city. I did have a family reach out to me specifically to say they were interested in ABA and ask my opinion on it, because they were thinking of traveling to another city, which would have been a flight to get that for their child. And I gave them my clear opinion, which was no, and here's why, and I've experienced both, and it will be like a night and day from what we've been doing together, and I'm thinking about the child's overall well-being, and connectedness for their whole life, not just whether they're demonstrating a particular skill right now. So that's what I mean when I say this. And the parents received the message, and I was happy. So yeah, the Ministry of Education, they have ministries there, like departments. The Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Health, the things that they put out are like very in line with DIR, floor time, neurodiversity affirming ideals are like talked about actively within the space. And within the Child Development Service, which is where I work, which is the service that provides, like, you know, the one that provides the diagnoses. And it's, you know, it's free because the whole health system is free, but it's also, you know, very, like, there's so much need, and there's like, it's not unusual for there to be a 12 to 15 month wait for an assessment, which is a really long time. So I was able to be a part of any of the kids that I saw that were having their assessment. So I was able to be a part of their kind of assessment process. So I didn't do the ADOS, but I sat in on the parent interviews and, you know, sort of supplied my insights and supported the families, but also like gave what I saw, because I had been the one going in the home for the last while, and kind of doing the work. So essentially like doing floor time style, my own style. And then part of that feedback meeting afterwards, where they would be given the diagnoses and said, you know, and there was always like tears and conversations, and it was a really hard thing. But the way that it was talked about was really like quite respectful, quite strengths-based, to the point where actually sometimes, you know, some of the reports that were written were like, wait, so if they're doing all these things, why do they have this diagnosis? Because the reports are just saying what they are doing and not what they're not doing. And the one thing, though, there was some discrepancy before I, you know, toot their horn so much. Like some of the funding that the families, you know, if they have an autism diagnosis, are eligible to apply for is I don't know, it has this kind of somewhat upsetting name for some of the parents, like the disabled child's allocation or something, some money they're eligible to get. And I had some families that were like, the whole process of working with me and working with the diagnosis team and the assessment and the service was so affirming, that that one form that said on it, you know, had the stamp of disabled children something or other, they were like, I can't bring myself to fill that out. I'm not ready yet. It's too final. It's too, like, I don't think of them as being disabled, you know, like, and I was like, I get it, but also that's kind of too bad, because then you're not getting that money that could be useful. So yeah, I mean, there's a ways to go, but I was really happy with what I saw.
You know, it kind of makes me think about this, I don't know, this contrasting dialogue that we see a lot in the neurodiverse community about really embracing strengths almost to the point of superpower. And then really also on the opposite end, looking more at, you know, internal disability cures, things like that. And I think it's kind of this really wide spectrum where it sounds like New Zealand maybe is closer to the end of strengths-based, almost superpower, where we are still in the US a little bit more so on that end of fixing and really identifying the disability within. And so, you know, we kind of try and like strike this balance, I think, of how can we acknowledge the disability that exists because of the combination of the individual and their environment and the presence or absence of supports, but also acknowledge and really emphasize the strengths that are inherent to every human, right? And so that's something that we struggle with, like within our documentation. Like we're in the system that reimburses based on remediated deficits.
Yeah.
But we are trying to practice in an affirming way that appreciates and brings to light strengths that children and adults maybe were never even aware of or never thought to have. So like, how do we communicate within a system that's not there yet, right? I don't know, just thoughts, but
Yeah, I had those thoughts at the beginning of my time there also, because I was pretty entrenched in the, I want to say positives, but also we have to justify our presence as therapists, right? And if we're just saying positives, then why are we even there?
right.
And my mentor, Michelle, in my role there with the young ones, kind of enlightened me to this way that, of course, it's there. They don't have any insurance companies to answer back to, but there are other professionals, doctors, neurologists, whatever, that see the treatment notes and the reports that we write as therapists. And she was saying that part of writing in a strengths-based way is not just for our frames and for the parents, well-being, and just to change the culture, but also it's giving credit to the reader. So if I'm saying that this 2-year-old is communicating, communicates with vocalizations and maybe, vocalizations with 3 consonants and often walks over to the item that they want, then I don't need to say using hand as tool or not speaking any words or, making unusual noises, because it's giving whoever the reader is credit that they would know that that is atypical and that they can act accordingly or keep that in mind. Mm-hmm. So that was something that I hadn't really thought of before.
Yeah.
And of course, with us, I wouldn't trust whatever random reader at some for-profit health insurance company to read developmental specifics of a child and be able to tease out what is normal and what is not, quote unquote. So that's a different thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, giving credit to the reader, that was the point.
Yeah. It's funny how you were phrasing that, because I recently had a discussion with some students, OT students and stuff, because I'm the Michigan coordinator for some OT students and stuff, and talking about more writing down what a child is actually doing, not necessarily saying it's a deficit, but for insurance purposes specifically, saying, they are performing these tasks, but the typical age equivalent would be this. And I was like, and it's only because usually the people reading, frankly, for insurance purposes, don't know the age norms of what's going. I was like, but you can also tell the parents, like, this is what we are writing about, is what the child is actually doing or what the individual is actually doing. Yeah, I was like, so you have that little bit for like what is quote unquote typical or in the age bracket for the insurance, but I was like, but that's the last part of your sentence. Just to get the context for the insurance company. I was like, but the rest of it should all be written as what you're observing is happening.
Yeah. And I guess that can work a little bit better when we think about like developmental milestones that kids get at certain ages and points, and it's sort of a down to up thing. But when it comes to neurodivergent ways of being, that's a bit more lateral.
Exactly.
Because it's not like, oh, well, they're 3, but 2-year-olds do this because 2-year-olds don't do this. Neurodivergent people do this. So, yeah.
Exactly.
I'm not in the space of working with children or within developmental norms, but I'm just throwing this out there, pardon my ignorance, but are there different milestones, or are there like resources for acknowledging different milestones for neurodivergent children?
There's no good ones yet, but there is new research, I think in Sweden, that is creating like an actual more time frame of when to expect certain types of things, but it's based off of specific levels of autism and stuff, and like not necessarily the full spectrum or different types of neurodivergence and stuff. But there is newer research starting, of course, not in the US, because we don't get most of our research from the US, frankly. But yeah, nothing that's like been super published, more like in the getting research data stage.
And it's, again, I'm asking this because I don't have the experience, but it's normal, quote unquote normal, to not hit milestones, right? To just skip over them as part of being a neurodivergent individual too, or to have different milestones. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean I was thinking more about like the maybe like 0 to 3 kind of milestones that can be a bit like when it gets older than that, it goes
Yeah.
from like steps on a ladder to more like branches in a tree and lots of little
Mhm.
twigs. Because when it comes to play and cognition, there's so much more going on.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think what you're saying is true because, they might never do something and might do lots of other things. Or yeah, I think you're
Right.
right. And I don't think there is, I don't think there is like you said, I don't think there is, a neurodivergent milestone chart. And I almost don't know if there should be, because then that's saying that all like autistic people, for example, would be the
Mhm.
same. And also there's the thing about autism co-occurring with, what we know as intellectual disability,
Yeah.
which can then look even a whole nother way or many other ways.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
Hmm. Interesting.
agreed. Because especially like even just thinking about the research that's currently being done, I was like, okay, but how do you measure quote unquote this? Because it's such a diversity with all of our different brains. How would you say what is actually within the quote unquote norm for neurodivergence?
Right.
Especially
right.
like
Yeah, it's kind of antithetical.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Or hypocritical. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, it kind of like is an oxymoron at that
Mhm.
point. So
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyway, I like to concern myself less with like, matching up charts and measurements, but more with like the experiences and the feelings and the
Yeah.
like, satisfaction of the people that I'm with.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Snap, 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 snap.
Yes, yeah. I can't snap, so it's just my pretending to snap.
Oh yeah.
Um, in what ways do you feel like occupational therapy in the United States can and should evolve to better support neurodivergent individuals?
Well, I was thinking about that one, and occupational therapy is a broad term, and in a lot of ways, it's kind of limited by like society itself.
Yeah.
Because as long as, we're functioning within, health systems, reimbursement structures, there are limitations. But I kind of want to just maybe highlight from my own experience, I think OT programs are a really pivotal place that, based on my experience, can improve a great deal. I went to school in 2012 to 2014, so a little bit ago. I'm sure things have changed. I really hope. But as somebody who has, never been a chair sitter in her life, going back to school a few years after undergrad, that was one of my big fears of like, oh my God, I'm going to have to sit still, in a fluorescently lit room, in a chair at a table for many hours and look in certain ways, say certain things, appear on in certain ways. And that's a lot. And so I kind of took some liberties in like standing and stretching a bit during some of those courses. And I was shot down by those professors. I was taken in for professional behavior, discussions. No. Yeah, absolutely. And I was really floored about that because I was thinking, like, here we are becoming occupational therapists. This isn't, we're not in a business school here.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is an adult place with adults, and like I'm doing my best to tend to my body so that I can like attend to the courses, so that I can, complete the hoops to become an OT. And that was very unsettling. And frankly, there was bullying. Like there were teachers that told me during some of our practicals, when I would do the home safety assessment and talk to, have one peer pretend to be like the person who lives in the home, the older adult, for example. And I won't forget this. The feedback I got from my professor was, she said, "You are an over-explainer, and you are going to be one of those OTs that never succeeds because of your over-explaining." And, that happened somewhere, I think it was 2013.
Mm-hmm.
It was upsetting, but it didn't break me because I already knew I am going to be a wonderful OT and this is my line of work. And indeed I am, and I have been. And I have a lot of people that could attest to that. But it's a real shame that people like that are in OT programs. And it also kind of made sense to me and my peers, who many of them also got called in for their professional behavior, just because we're kind of like being humans. And we kind of realized, okay, who are the OTs that are working in the ivory tower here? Not the ones who we're going to be working with, not the ones who actually want to be OTs because they're professors now, and like espousing this kind of, going on power trips and stuff. And there were exceptions. There were some lovely professors, but it's a real shame that like I'm not talking about like the 70s or something. This is recent, and that was my experience, and I have peers that have similar experiences. So to any OT school teachers or staff members out there, hopefully you'll hear this and think about what goes on, and recognize that the guise of professional behavior is one that is of privilege. And it's, I would much rather if a teacher felt a certain feeling in response to something that I did with my body, that they told me, seeing you do X, I felt Y, rather than what they did. That I can engage with,
Yeah. Man, I mean, so we were in grad school together, which is how we met, and graduated in 2019. So
for you, I have another caveat for that.
Oh yeah,
we'll get into it.
But even as soon as recent as 5 years ago, neurodiversity affirming was not a term we ever once heard. We had a very, very, very brief stint, if you will, on developmental disabilities at all. I think autism was like 15 minutes of a single lecture. But I think the bigger, truer, like neurodiversity affirming shift that needs to happen within our school systems is accommodating and accepting the diversity within their own students and within ourselves. Because if we can't appreciate and accommodate ourselves, how on earth are we supposed to advocate for our clients, right?
Yeah.
And I know you have a very personal, I don't know if you want to share it or not.
Yeah, I'll share it. So why the caveat was that I kind of like mentioned is there was I graduated in 2020, of course, like end of the pandemic, because of one final exam. It was worth like 30% of our grade. And it had to be done orally. So I have written accommodations and stuff for my dyslexia and ADHD that frankly didn't really have to use. I used in grade school, but didn't have to use till grad school. And kind of openly said, word finding is really hard for me. And you're giving me a time limit to kind of give this case study, right? Which we get the case study 24 hours in advance, which I'm like, I'll have a whole binder of everything, of like all my treatment plans, everything I'm going to do. It's all, everything that's in my brain is here. But you're physically asking me to do it orally. And I don't know if that's going to be possible. Kind of like giving the caveat beforehand. And I did not pass that class because of 1 point missed from that entire exam. So I missed it by a single point. And kind of like talking to professors and stuff, saying like, we're talking about giving accommodations for people. Yeah, you're not going to do it for your own students, even though you see the written work. Like you know that I'm not making up what's going on in my brain, like I just literally can't word find for 15 minutes. It's not there. It's not going to be there. Sure enough, had to take the same class over again the next year. Still kind of struggled orally, but if it wasn't for another professor saying, she literally has it. Literally, it's right here. Yes, Amy Lamb. She actually used to be one of the AOTA presidents.
I think I've seen the name.
But literally kind of advocating for me. Because even though I had friends, you know, in the program and stuff, I had written accommodations. It didn't matter because they're like, oh, we're gonna have to present to families and stuff. I was like, okay, but I'll have like cheat sheets in front of me. We'll talk over email. Like, we'll have a collaborative experience. I'm not trying to info dump an entire person's life that I've never met in 15 minutes.
Right.
Like, you know, with context behind it. So yeah, just not even having for their own students and having already built accommodations in for it that they know that they can advocate for themselves, that they can't teach it to some other, you know, on some other capacity, which is just kind of hard in that aspect. But even if it wasn't just my own experience, we had a couple, not to kind of get into too much other tangents, but we had other like teachers make comments about people not wearing makeup and things like that. Like, you know, just straight up came in and had a whole 15-minute tangent on like how so unprofessional it is that we're in class and we're not wearing makeup in a class where we're learning about, I don't know, transfers and stuff all day. Like, where we're not physically.
Oh my God.
And so
that is disgusting.
And that's, you know, end of 2020. Like, I was in my field work, so that was kind of maybe a little bit 2019. But not that, like, that was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Why is 5 years ago? And like how you mentioned, you know, for 2013, it's not like these experiences are so in the past. And for being a profession that's about like trying to adapt and find how can we like work with the environment or get the best fit to be able to do the thing you want to do. I was just like, isn't that the whole point of our profession?
There were so many opportunities that were missed there. I mean, I lived this with you, Stephanie, and so like every time I even think about it, my blood just absolutely boils to think about how you were failed.
Also, I need to move this. It keeps on making a noise. I'm sorry.
I think that's such a big like underlying drive for both of us is like we don't want people to be wronged in that way, right? Here's this person who's like Stephanie's I'm sorry, I'm just being all defensive. It makes me so angry. But like Stephanie has lived and breathed occupational therapy since she was a little kid, right? She was the one that like everyone would not cheat off of, but like want support with because she understood and loved and breathed occupational therapy. And for her to get to that point where she was passing and there was no concern, and then to be expected to fit this very narrow expectation for what passing, for what an effective therapist could look like, derail that is just so against all the roots of what OT should be. Mm-hmm. And especially neurodiversity affirming. So it's like, listen, we are never, God will, we are never going to allow folks that we come in contact with to be failed in that way. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's been a big driver for both of us.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, seeing it just on a professional level, because even with you in New Zealand, kind of writing goals so that the professionals that are quote unquote above you that are reading it can have a better understanding of neurodivergence and neurodivergent affirming practices. It's hard when a field that was kind of grown to kind of help accommodate specifically, like, because we knew something was not working, and being mental health based and being, okay, it's doing stuff that people are used to doing and love in their own occupation. How did we kind of come so far that we're teaching these things that are so medical model? So I love that you bring the school system kind of into it because it really starts in the school.
Yeah. No, before intervention, 0 to 3. I mean, you're setting the tone for these folks' whole life, which I think you had said before, which is so true. And you know, we are kind of working with the adults who unfortunately are kind of the aftermath of all of the trauma and all of the scripts and preconceived notions that they have been fed their whole lives. And we're trying to undo a lot of that internalized ableism. But the opportunity to get in there and write a fresh narrative for them is so hopeful, I think. And so I think that the work that you are doing and other neurodiversity affirming pediatric therapists is just so invaluable for the future of neurodivergence as a culture, I mean, really. So thank you.
Thank you for letting us do that tangent.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing that story. It kind of brought me right. I could see myself in the classrooms, and it's just really a shame. And I don't know who has to, I mean, not who has to hear this, because nobody will change if they don't want to from within. But there's some harm. There's some harm being done. You can look at like the OT subreddit and read people's stories, and it's pretty basic, but we should be showing over telling.
Yeah.
And if we can't like show and model what our profession stands for, like maybe we shouldn't be in it at all.
Yeah. True.
Yeah, true. I think the potential at its core for occupational therapy is one that is just unlike anything else. The practice and getting to like living and breathing and practicing what it can be, though, is I think there's quite a gap there.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. This was such a, I feel like we could have talked for 15 more hours, and I don't have that often. That I like to keep social interactions short and succinct, but like when there's just so many things that that make you question things and consider things, it's just very fun. So thank you.
I'm so glad. I'm glad that I don't know. I guess I thinking that you two graduated more recently. I'm like, oh, I'm excited for the next generation. Not that it's really a generation, but
right.
Yeah, it's cool. It's nice to know that there are colleagues out there around that, all the Facebook groups are one thing, but that's just the written word, but actually having a conversation is it's special. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. And hopefully this is just the first time that we interact, and we can keep in touch, and it's a small community, and to make that face someone is really impactful and powerful. So hopefully.
And we'll be sure to, if there's people that reach out asking for services in Portland, Oregon, to kind of shoot them your way to Bloom.
Totally. Send them my way.
Bloom OT and Consulting, you said?
Huh? Bloom? Oh, yeah. Bloom Occupational Therapy and Consulting. Okay. And although I am aiming at 0 to 3, honestly, anyone is fine. I'm happy to chat with anyone, really, since I'm just starting out with this practice.
Well, wonderful. We are not licensed in Oregon, so anyone we get in the Oregon area, we will send your way.
Cool.
We get a lot of parents too, where they're just like, hey, I just want to know how to be a better parent myself, and kind of self-identifying. So we'll definitely send them your way.
Yeah. And you can let me know if you're ever in Portland. We can meet up.
We can keep it weird together.
I love it.
Yes. Keep it that way.
Yeah, for sure. All right.
Also, this is really my first time saying I'm not neurodivergent within the OT space at all. I've only ever shared it with friends, so
this is a big day for you then.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that with us. We're honored.
It is a big thing.
We're part of that. This is a big part of your journey. So
that is.
Yeah, I'm coming out.
Yeah. I'm so excited selfishly to be a part of your coming out journey for this. But congrats.
Thanks.
Yeah, definitely do some extra upside down yoga poses.
Yeah. And in nature. I don't know. I like to be out in the snow. I like the getting in touch with it. Whatever you
we'll
need.
probably go walk my horse real quick just to do all that stuff. So
she drops it. Walk my horse. Like everyone has horses around.
Oh, I thought you said walk in the forest. Oh, you walk your horse.
I do have that little, but there's a mini horse in the back. But yeah, just kind of do what you need to do. I know that's what we're gonna do.
Thank you.
Take care of yourself.
Yeah. Awesome.
All right. Well, take care.
Okay.
Elana.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks again.
That's right. That's my name. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Neurodivergent Voices. Interested in an interview? Email divergecs@gmail.com to get it scheduled.